Hello, I am Meredith Graham, the Education Digital Project Specialist at the National Humanities Center. This presentation is co-authored with Sarah Harris, Associate Librarian at the National Humanities Center. The center is a private, nonprofit organization and the only independent institute dedicated exclusively to advanced study in all areas of the humanities. This session will describe how our institution uses the equitable, diverse, and inclusive subject vocabulary and taxonomy to describe the humanities resources hosted and indexed on our website and in our OER Commons microsite library. We were motivated to create this subject thesaurus in 2018 to describe our resources because a major aspect that perpetuates inequities in search results for both seekers and publishers of scholarship is that most descriptive metadata, the descriptive information used to facilitate discovery and identification of resources, is largely outdated. Through our efforts to publicly share these subject terms with all of our content partners and individual users, we are able to recommend and teach a vocabulary that impacts not only the ways they describe the OERs, but also impacts their future searches and own language around specific topics. As Sarah and I are both members of the center's metadata team that meets weekly to discuss issues around metadata, we quickly began to realize how a revised control vocabulary with inclusive terms could impact the center's programming, not just our website. As part of the education team at the center, I will speak about how our education programming has adapted this inclusive language in our materials for teachers. We offer a wide range of education programming that includes humanities in class webinars and humanities in class online courses for professional development credits, and our humanities in class digital library that houses all of the OERs for K-12 teachers. Our OER library contains specific materials created by the center and our institutional partners, as well as any OER user. Although the user can add their own subject terms to their OER, Sarah provides more detailed metadata for each resource. The digital library is just one aspect of our education division. For context, in this academic year, we will offer 5 sessions to take 11 online courses, 42 free webinars that connect scholars with K-12 teachers, and 2 institutes on teaching African American history. In this presentation, we will specifically address the ways that our inclusive language that is present in our metadata, but also the descriptive language used on the front end of our website and in our marketing materials has impacted our digital library and our online resources. Our online courses. Sarah will first explain how our inclusive language taxonomy was developed by our metadata team, and then I will share our experiences incorporating this specific taxonomy into our education program.
Thank you, Meredith. So when tasked with applying subject terms to National Humanities Center resources, the NHC librarians wanted to apply more modern, culturally appropriate, and diverse terms for subjects, named periods of times, and places. So we looked at sources like the Library of Congress subject headings, the MLA International Bibliography Thesaurus, and Academic Search Premier subject terms. But we were unable to find an existing controlled vocabulary that met those standards. A major aspect that perpetuates inequities in search results for both seekers and publishers of scholarship is that most descriptive metadata is largely outdated, Eurocentric, colonial, exclusive, and heteronormative. This has not gone ignored by librarians in recent years, and there is much discussion around the insensitivity of terms used in the Library of Congress subject headings. You can even find policies online now, like this statement from the University of Virginia Libraries, acknowledging the biases that are built into existing descriptive practices. When we got started and we're beginning the process of tagging our own materials, we generally had 6 librarians and interns sitting together in a room, and we would discuss our ideas around using certain terms. We read books about taxonomy and controlled vocabularies and got started creating a hierarchy of subject terms. As our list of terms grew, we would flag terms to discuss as a larger group. Our group brought some subject area expertise, but we were not ourselves a demographically diverse group of people. So despite having a variety of subject expertise in areas like classics, musicology, English languages and literature, South Asian languages and literature, Indian philosophy and religion, we were still conscious of the fact that we were leaving out the voices of communities and groups of people who were not represented in the demographic makeup of our own metadata group. So we tried our best at being fair and inclusive with our terms the best we could without having the funding and resources available to bring more individuals in on the project. Like other areas of librarianship, metadata is not neutral, and we've tried to be conscious all along that these are not just decisions about terminology, but are ethical decisions that affect users' experience of interacting with our collections. There is certainly significant overlap in many of the terms we did adopt, which would conform to many of the existing subject vocabularies, but we now aggregate the subject terms we use from a variety of sources, which allows us to use more culturally appropriate and diverse terms. When people and groups are providing terminology to represent themselves, it's important to learn about and use those options. Here are some examples of controlled vocabularies of groups of people that we consult for our taxonomy. And our controlled vocabulary we use internally as a scope note. We refer to broader and narrower terms used for terms and sources, which vocabulary we've gotten the term from. In terms of where we were housing these terms, when we started our metadata overhaul project, we were using Google Sheets. After our internal departments reviewed their inventory of content and we inventoried our website, we added each asset to a spreadsheet and developed our metadata schema based on Dublin Core. Sheets worked well enough for a while, but didn't give us the control we needed to maintain the controlled vocabulary of subject terms. We had a sheet for our resources and a sheet for terms, and it was too easy to make mistakes in spelling and other general errors that are easy to do when adding text to spreadsheet cells. As the collection and the list of subject terms grew, we needed the functionality of a database to help manage our growing metadata library. We needed an efficient way to keep counts on terms, allow for drop-down style options for auto-selecting terms, and so we imported our sheets into a product called Airtable. We have been using Airtable as our internal database tracking for center resources. Users of our website perform searching and discovery on our WordPress site and on our OER digital library, and internal staff maintain Airtable as a backup and a more robust form of metadata tracking. Recently, we've focused on evaluating a particular topic in order to ensure that we are using the preferred inclusive term. Gender and queer studies materials are ones we have been working through more recently. We've added non-binary as a term and had previously used LGBTQ people as our broader term for sexuality and gender identity. But after recent conversations with local queer center in our area, we've modified this term to queer people. Soon we will be implementing a change across all three of our systems to Black Americans from African Americans, as this we found is the language that's used by groups like the NAACP and Black Lives Matter. We have used Indigenous Americans from the start because so much of our collection focused on US history, but we'll soon be implementing terminology from the two Indigenous knowledge networks mentioned previously in our sources list. And this may have us rethink our use of that term, which we may broaden to Indigenous people. In addition to standardizing the metadata keyword terms to prioritize equity and inclusion, we perform regular maintenance and review of the terms used on our OER Commons microsite known as the Humanities in Class Digital Library, which can be added by users contributing content to the library. Because users can add their own keywords in the OER Commons environment, in addition to the standard keywords we use, our aim is to review and curate these periodically and do a larger full review biannually. This is in order to remove keyword errors and synonyms, to limit the amount of one-off keywords in order to reduce the effects of silos among the collections. So as terms get added by users and our content partners in the Humanities in Class Digital Library, the keyword tags are reviewed and get merged or modified to ensure that they align with the equitable and inclusive subject vocabulary we have instituted across our platforms. Unfortunately, for much of this year, our keyword list on the digital library was broken, and we've been sort of at the mercy of the platform providers to correct this issue. It's taken much longer than anticipated and has prevented us from performing many of that subject metadata cleanup that we would generally be able to do on a routine basis. What this looks like in practice, though, you can see here where keyword tags were added by a user who used Native American. So we did a merge to update those to Indigenous Americans. A new version of the platform we use will soon be updated and our keyword list restored and free of bugs so that we'll be able to correct terms we've been unable to closely review while the database was broken. And we will be able to begin guiding users to the preferred term with more ease by suggesting terms as they are typing in a search box, like many search engines do now. Adding our own materials and the content partner materials has increased our subject vocabulary significantly. Our content partner institutions specialize in many areas of the humanities, and as materials have been added and described with keywords, our subject vocabulary has grown to over 6,000 terms of topics, events, place names, names of people, titles of literature, films, and works of art. Through our efforts to publicly share these terms with all of our partners and individual users, we are able to recommend and teach a vocabulary that impacts not only the way they describe the OERs, but also impacts their future searches and own language around specific topics.
Sarah has just explained how the librarians and the metadata team have updated our descriptive language for all center digital assets, but I will speak more specifically about how that changed the inclusive language that we use in our Humanities in Class online courses. These courses are written for K-12 teachers, faculty, and cultural institution staff for them to learn new topics for a modern classroom. The teachers can achieve professional development credits upon completion. Our courses are different from others offered to teachers because they are written by scholars and are managed by instructors with specific subject expertise in each field. My job is to write these courses. We offered courses on topics like medieval Africa, Ming China, women of the early Americas, geographic information system mapping, contemporary American music, and civil discourse. These 3 courses highlighted empowering mapivists using maps and data to examine social issues in the humanities classroom, Let's Talk, using the humanities to promote civil discourse in the classroom, and My Piece of the American Pie, Race, Gender, and Sexuality in Contemporary American Music, are those where we started using the inclusive language developed by the center's metadata team. Before I dive into specific ways that we changed these courses, let me first explain the process of how we developed the courses, the stakeholders involved, and the review process before publication. There are many different people and teams involved in developing and promoting the online courses. There is the online course design team, including Mike Williams, the education programs manager, and me, the online course proofreading team, external institutions that provide course materials, subject experts that provide scholarly videos, our online resources manager, and finally, the center's marketing team. The materials found in the courses are all open source, and they come directly from the course partners like the New York Historical Society. Over the last year, I have instituted a new process where we model a peer review and our own center editing work. Our newest courses will first go to a subject expert to check for errors or make suggestions, and then the edited version will be shared with our center online course proofreading team. On our online course proofreading team, we are able to employ members who check our courses with different concerns in mind. Associate Librarian Sarah reads our courses for formatting, editorial corrections, and bibliographic concerns. Assistant Librarian Joe Melillo reads for diversity, equity, and inclusive content, ensuring that all of our courses meet the standards of our DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion team. And finally, our education programs coordinator, Raven Ferguson, also a K-12 teacher, ensures that our courses make sense for teachers. Here is how this new workflow from the metadata meetings to the proofreading team editing phase impacts the development of the online courses. First, the metadata team defines key metadata terms and adds the terms to our controlled vocabulary. Second, they share changes of OER terms with proofreading team and NHC staff. Third, the education team uses new terms in humanities in class online courses and marketing materials. Fourth, the proofreading team edits humanities in class online courses to use inclusive language in course language and course materials. And finally, we recommend for humanities in class online course participants to use the inclusive language themselves. As you can see, we are ensuring that this new metadata language is included in our courses through this multi-step process. The more complicated part of this process is when we connect with our course participants to use this inclusive language. To ensure that we are reaching our participants effectively, we add the inclusive language to specific places in the course. First, in our directions for contributing to discussion boards. Second, in expanding lessons for more inclusive topics. Third, in our scholar videos. And fourth, in choosing lesson materials. These different spots are simple ways to standardize our language. We can achieve this updated language in the courses because of our proofreading team, as I mentioned. Although I mentioned earlier that our proofreading team is essential to reading our courses for both editorial relevance and diversity, equity, and inclusion concerns. When thinking about our inclusive language through our proofreading guide, considers questions and prompts that ensure that we use inclusive language and have inclusive content. For example, are women's stories included in the lesson? Are people of color represented in this course? Does this course content reflect culturally diverse perspectives and incorporate media reflecting a variety of ethnicities, body styles, gender designations, and abilities? Based on the feedback from the proofreading team, we have incorporated our virtual etiquette section and improved our virtual etiquette section, and now include a statement on inclusive language for our course participants. We ask that all participants use inclusive language, which is inclusive language refers to language that makes every attempt to include comprehensively all groups in the community. We want to do our best to model discussion curation for our teachers as they think about how to manage the discussions in their own classrooms. Although we cannot always tell teachers how to manage the difficulties of their classrooms, we can suggest ways that they can confidently prioritize civil discussions and promote an inclusive environment. Let's take a look at one of our courses, My Piece of the American Pie, Race, Gender, and Sexuality in Contemporary American Music. This course was originally developed by Teach Rock, part of the Rock and Roll Forever Foundation. But as a new employee and a musicologist, I wanted to rethink how to incorporate our progressive, inclusive language and my own interests in contemporary American music. By taking the principles of our inclusive language, I was able to rethink titles of our modules, the support that we offer our teachers in providing resources for supporting trans students, and an opportunity to update the list of artists featured in our module on queer people. For example, many of the artists included in the first version of the module on queer music were white women artists who used inclusive language or topics in their music, musicians like Taylor Swift or Madonna. This opportunity to redo the course offered the possibility of being inclusive of artists from the queer community like Shay Diamond, Sophie, and Janelle Monáe. The updated module also highlights the importance of looking to the communities where these terms are used, rather than creating them on our own. For example, we came to use the term queer people after a Metadata team member reached out to the LGBTQ Center of Durham to ask their opinion on our new inclusive language system. In addition to adding more voices to our course, we also wanted to make sure that we provided resources for our teachers on queer rights, but specifically trans rights. Although these resources may not speak directly to the laws of their state, we provided them with trustworthy sources ready for the classroom. Therefore, we are hoping our teachers navigate inclusivity in the classroom by teaching them helpful language to use with their students and providing them with fact-based resources about diversity in the classroom.
And in making these small inclusive updates, we are changing the ways that individual users, content partner institutions, and our own staff think about the language that they use to describe open educational resources, and their teaching materials. We've also learned some lessons along the way. Keeping this type of metadata up to date, especially on a platform with some level of crowdsourced or user applied descriptive metadata, does require nearly constant maintenance. Platforms change, they break and evolve, which can make us reliant on platform providers to perform updates and fix bugs. This in turn can affect user experience and the timing of completing certain tasks. Terminology changes over time, making an inclusive vocabulary a living thing that evolves with the language that we use. And metadata and how we describe things with subject vocabulary terms is relevant across the entire center or other organizations, not just the back end of your website or for just librarians. Thank you.